Hi, I'm Carmen Wild, and this is Business Without Barriers, the show proving we can break through the myriad barriers we're facing and create enriching futures when we bring humanity back to business. Our guest today is Professor Steyn Heckroodt, international thought leader in the fields of leadership, strategic thinking, coaching, and people development. He's the president of a UAE university, founder and CEO of the Platform for Connected Leadership, and creator of the Connected Leadership Framework. Steyn and his team believe that everyone has greatness in them, and through inspiration and motivation, and by creating a culture of connectedness, leaders are enabled to supersede performance. Their passion is to inspire leaders to think differently about the challenges of the 21st century and learn through self-reflection and engagement with others. Steyn engages with internationally renowned business schools such as Harvard Business School Publishing, Geneva Business School, Swiss Business School, and York St. John's, and is being published in the Oxford University Press and Harvard Business Review, amongst others. Steyn is married with 2 children. He's worked in 48 countries and currently lives in Dubai, where he enjoys wakeboarding out on the open sea every weekend. A very, very warm welcome to you, Steyn.
Thank you very much. Indeed, an honor, and very excited about this interview. Thank you so much for the welcome.
Absolute pleasure, and very excited too. I know what you're going to share is going to help us inspire the greatness out of ourselves. So I want to start with something you shared with me. You said you and your daughter climbed one of the highest dunes at Sossusvlei in Namibia when she was only 8, and that you helped her climb that. What made that experience so special for you?
I think I have a very specific approach to bringing up children. I love children. So not just my own, I've always been engaged in some way or another in local community where I can help. Kids are just, they're just amazing. You know, they don't have any of the hang-ups that a lot of adults have. and I've often, as an observer in life, seen how kids are being brought up to compete. And unfortunately, schooling systems are structured like that as well. So competition as a way to get kids to perform is being used quite often, quite regularly. It's almost like a societal norm. And I've always, from day one, had a little bit of a challenge with this because, you know, what if you're not the fastest or the cleverest? You know, how do you maintain your self-confidence if you don't win? This competing nature of humanity from a very young age. So what I've done, I've taken a decision in terms of our own children, and obviously I've taken the decision along with my wife, where we don't teach our kids to compete. The only thing that we do is we help them to build their confidence, because we know that life's going to throw all sorts of challenges at them. And if you've always competed and you kind of get accustomed to only be recognized when you win, what do you do when you lose? What do you do when there's a smarter kid in the class? Or one day somebody else gets the job that you really want because they're just better than what you are, or more appropriate fit. You know, how do you deal with that? And I believe the way in which we deal with that is if we can fall back and reflect and be comfortable with who we are. And that only comes from building confidence. So we've taken a view on our children that we will do our utmost best not to bring them up, but to develop them as individuals, to really build them as individuals. Because even though they're our bloodline, and I mean, any parent knows how extremely attached you feel to your own children. That bond of love is just different than any other love that you have ever experienced. So, but despite that closeness, despite that bond, I do realize that the kids, you know, the day they come into the world, they are also individuals. So they're not mini me's or mini you's, they're individuals. And as a parent, I respect that space. And the only contribution I believe I can make is to develop and to build up those individuals. So the story about the desert, you look, I mean, my daughter is, I have an incredible soft spot for her. I think, like most dads probably do, or should have, at least. She just means the world to me. On days where I have a down day, or maybe I get a bad rating for one of my sessions, or bad feedback for one of my classes, if I'm really down in the dumps and I feel like, this is like, what am I doing? She's always the first person I phone at the end of the day, because she just always thinks that I'm great. And she just loves me, and she just wants to know how it is. And she's always bubbly when I phone her, So my own pep up, is my daughter. It's like, I really feel, I mean, people will not believe it when I tell them this, so it's okay if you don't want to. I'm really not lying. My daughter and I had quite a heavy fight last week over subject matters that you need to choose at school. And this, ladies and gentlemen, I kid you not, was the first fight that my daughter and I had in her now 16 and a half years of age. We never fought. Never. We just understand one another and engage in discussions. And I think it comes, from events like this desert event. There were 4 kids. She was 8 years old. And this dune was incredibly high. I mean, it was like the highest dune I've ever seen, and we were at the bottom of this dune taking pictures in the, I think they call it the Dead Valley, Duiasia Valley or something like that. I can't remember. Sulphur's Valley is where it is. So it's this beautiful landscape. Everybody goes there to take pictures. And the kids started playing because they're getting bored. So they started running up this dune. Now, this dune is high, man. And there were 4 of them. And I was watching them. And I just knew what was going to happen here. And at some point in time, that competitiveness that kids are being brought up with, that took over. And clearly my daughter was going to lose this. Clearly she was not going to be on the top of the dune first, not even second or third. And I'll never forget it. Her brother was with her. Her brother is 3.5 years a senior. There was another girl that was with her, which was her same age. And then my brother's mate, also the same age as my brother, not my brother, her brother. And literally about 8 meters before they reach the crest, they get to the top, and she still got about another 8 meters to cover. And she just went to sit down. She just dropped and just started crying, like sad. So I was standing at the bottom of this dune, and I was looking at my wife, and I said to her, "You know what's going to happen here?" She said to me, "Yeah, you're going to have to go up there." I said to her, "Yeah, I'm going to have to go up there." Honestly, I didn't want to. I'm not a kid. I'm not 16. I mean, we're in the sun. I'm tired. I'm an adult. I mean, this is a heavy dune, man. So I started to climb. And as soon as she saw me climbing, she ran all the way back. This is the most amazing thing. She could have just waited there. She ran all the way back for me to support her. And all I did is I told her, don't look up, look down. Just look down. We're going to do 10 strides at a time and then rest. 10 strides and rest. Because this is one of those dunes. It was so steep that when you walk, you kind of sink back. It's not like, it's not a complete step. It's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. And I just, that's all I did all the time. I said, well, let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10. Rest. And eventually we got to the top. And I've never seen anybody booming so much. She stood on the top with her arms spread out like this. And what I remember as we drove away from this site, we were a couple of friends. So it was our 2 kids and their 2 kids, and we had one of these big 4x4 things. So we were all in the same car, and the kids are sitting in the back, and I can hear the story. And the story was this amazing adoration almost that the other kids had for Danielle because she made it.
Oh.
And that's the thing. She came last, but I had an opportunity here. I could either build her up, or the story would have just been her, giving her a hard time as we drive back because she lost. And that, that story will always stay with me, and it will stay with her as well. We often refer back to it because I believe that that's what you should do. I believe you should not just your own children, you should build up people. And but yeah, this was a very significant, tangible example of exactly what that means.
Wow.
So yeah.
Wow, thank you. Very beautiful. And I think what you've explained in a nutshell is actually our journey on life, taking steps forward and then steps back, and needing a witness and a help to, to help us ascend, and then having that joy afterwards of maybe not having won, but having not given up. So, and it sounds to me like that within that story represents everything about your life's work right now. So a lovely introduction to who you are and the kind of dad you are. She's blessed to have you and your wife. So
thank you.
It's never been more relevant right now to challenge the way we do things. Tell me why you believe we need to challenge ourselves to disrupt our thinking patterns.
I think a lot of, look, I'm in the world of business. So, my day job requires me I teach strategy, but besides that, I also do strategy. So I'm also a consultant, as you mentioned, the company that we've established. So I develop leaders. Now, a lot of times you find yourself in a room full of leaders, and you will deal with certain things, but only on a hypothetical level. So, you'll do an assessment, for instance, on how good are you, how innovative are you as a leader, or creative, or how good are you at managing ambiguity or uncertainty. And most of the time, because those things are all hypothetical by nature, the answer that you're getting or the scenario that you're trying to sketch is not really all that real. People almost have to immerse themselves into that to kind of participate in that kind of exercise. And what COVID has done is COVID has given us a real scenario. So it's not hypothetical anymore. The world is totally disrupted. It's very uncertain. We have volatility in case numbers. We have volatility in the trends. We simply stuck in an abyss where tomorrow is no longer a continuation of yesterday. Now, the human mind is very good with predictability. So we can take something as simple as buying a car. Most of us don't have the cash to buy a car outright. But the minute we get a job and you get a salary, you kind of assume that, I'm going to get the salary every month. And then you're willing to take more risk. And then you go to the bank and you take out a loan and you buy a car or a house or whatever. Why? Because it's predictable. The minute that something moves into a state of predictability or a domain of predictability, we're more comfortable with it. And in a way, our brains are lazy with that. Your brain will always allow you to think in the way that you are more comfortable with. Whilst COVID took away that predictability and introduced massive levels of uncertainty. And not just uncertainty, also fear of job loss, and even more real, fear of death. So it's not just an economic disruptor, but it's a disruptor that plays in on one of the deepest fundamentals of us as human beings. And it confronts us with not just the reality of death, but also the fear thereof that a lot of people have. And if not the fear, not wanting to die. I mean, nobody wants to die. Even people that believe that there's an afterlife, they don't want to die. They kind of find comfort in the fact that if they don't live, they move from here, that there's another life. But other than that, nobody wants to die. So there's a lot of emotional, psychological, and real challenges that we've been confronted with. Now, if you look at it from a strategy perspective, we have to ask the question of, how did we end up with the kind of world that we have today? And I'm more referring just to the commercial world, okay? Not necessarily on an ethical or on a value-driven level, but just sort of the commercial world that we know today. And this is something that COVID highlighted to us, consists of a country like China that manufactures about 87% of everything that we buy in the world. Now, when you teach business to anybody, you typically would tell them diversify. I mean, even if you have a savings portfolio, your broker at some point in time will say to you, we're going to diversify. We're going to put some money there, some money there. So that's how you mitigate risk. And yet, the commercial models that we are being taught on business schools, and I know this because I teach for them, the curriculum is very straightforward, that if you want to make more money, the way in which you should do it is you should reduce cost and you should increase your market. So we call it scaling. So obviously, if there's a country in the world where things are cheapest to make, your business school mindset, your MBA that you did is going to tell you, well, go there, because it's going to drive up profits, it's going to drive up margin. It kind of just, it makes logical sense. But if you think about it, it's a very risky thing to do, because you will tell your own kids to diversify. Your broker will tell you to diversify, yet you're a CEO to an organization and you don't diversify supply. You put it all into one country. And to give you some numbers, I mean, in 2003, the total export GDP from China was about 280 billion US. About 14 years later, it was 5 times that. All because of the fact that the world, in terms of manufacturing, moved to China. So people often look at China and say, China this, China that. Remember, China didn't create itself. The world created China as we know China today. So to try and answer your question, this is not a discussion about China. I'm trying to just lead you in terms of, why is it necessary for us to think differently? We have an unbalanced commercial model. So a virus breaks out in China and it spreads all over the world. And we needed that to see how we have centralized and in the process exposed our economic systems that we have. Because a company that's dependent on supplies from China is kind of buggered, bar all the other economic impacts that we had with it. So that's the first thing we're saying. Look, if you look at and many times you can't blame leaders for this, because this is what they've been taught. So it's a SWOT: strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat. It's a PESTEL: politics, economy. So they've been taught to deal with frameworks that is supposedly there to deal with predictability and stability. So the minute you shake that predictability and the stability, these frameworks, yes, you can still use them, but they're not enough. They're not sufficient. And we need to look at that. So that's the one thing. The other, because the result that we now need is not predictability anymore. It's unpredictability, randomness. And how do I deal with that? My level of decision making, my model of decision making should be totally different. If things are stable, typically I categorize, I segment, and I take a decision, and it's kind of predictable what's going to happen. But if I deal with an uncertain environment, I should probe, I should experiment, I should deal with the emerging outcome thereof. And that's not necessarily predictable. So how agile are you? How flexible are you? How open are you to new ideas? Can you really think innovatively about things? That's the one part of it. The other part of it is just, and again, COVID has done us this favor by elucidating this, how incredibly unbalanced the world is in terms of health and wealth. Yeah, and we could see this very specifically during lockdown, where, the very wealthy, I mean, there were photos on social media all over, I mean, they just had a ball insofar as lockdown is concerned, anything from a jacuzzi to a yacht to a barbecue. And millions of people being stuck in a little shanty makeshift home with 20 or 30 people together. So this incredible social inequality, which has always been there, but we end up kind of ignoring it because we don't really see it, because we're too busy, because we work. And, from time to time we'll do some good, or we'll have a program at work that, supports the local school or whatever. So, we're okay. Well, what COVID has shown us clearly is this imbalance is it's out of proportion. So we're asking leaders to think differently about how they first and foremost view the economic system, the commercial system that their organization has implemented up until now, and then also what's the larger impact of that. And there's in that sense 5 things that we're asking leaders to do in terms of thinking differently. The first thing starts with you as an individual. Spend some time and reflect. And we saw how many people during COVID sort of came out of the woodwork and finally admitted that they're struggling. In the beginning, it was, don't worry, give us 3 weeks, we'll have this under wraps, or we're going to wait it out for 3 months, and then we're just going to carry on as per normal. This is not going away. This disruption is here to stay for a very long time. And the economic impact of shutdowns worldwide, it's going to take even longer to recover. All the statistics about this pandemic is much worse than anything we've ever seen before. And we're still not out of the woods. So starting with self-reflection, becoming aware of your strengths, your weaknesses, being willing to be vulnerable, being willing to ask for help. Just think differently in terms of that. Dealing with teams, building relationships, but not the kind of relationships that's based on, hey, we got to build a high-performance team. No, the kind of relationship that's once again built on supporting one another. You have people that have got real challenges right now. You have families that's dispersed across the globe. You've got people that either know someone, either in the family or friends, that either has COVID or passed away from it. So the human care in terms of managing team is much more required. We all hear about empathy a lot of times, and it's interesting. Empathy is the #1 skill in terms of how to deal with this pandemic. That ability of you to really immerse yourself into other people's challenges, as opposed to saying, well, it's okay, I'm sorted, I'm part of the digital elite, my business can carry on, so tough on those who are struggling. No, we got to really just get out of that mode. So that's the second level. The third level is organization. The biggest challenge that business leaders have is to deal with disruption, and not just that, but also to disrupt themselves. How can you change your model, not just for the sake of the shareholder, but also for the sake of the staff, sake of customers, sake of continuation of your supply chain. If you think about it, in the grocery industry, for instance, here in the UAE, we work with one company, and at times they had to charter in flights during the pandemic, which cost them up to 10 times more per product than what it normally did. And they didn't pass a single price increase on to customers. And when I asked the CEO about this, I said to him, but how on earth? He gave me a very good answer. He said, look, our business focuses on customers, customer first. So if I had to pass the price increase on to the customer, that would have been opportunistic. That would have told the customer that, they don't really care about us. They cared about us because they made some money out of us. And as soon as the cost goes up and we have this international crisis, they just pass the cost on to us. So that's the kind of wisdom we need for people to really stick to their guns and remain committed and absorb the cost into this multi-billion-dollar multinational organizations that we have globally. And then the fourth level is society, to really care, to really care, not just, as I say, to participate through a social responsibility program, in terms of the local school, but to really care. Care to the level of, do you know where your people that work for you, do you know where they live? Do you know how far they have to commute? Do you know what time they get up in the morning to be in time for work? Do you really know? And that's the level of care that's required. It's all got to do with building up people. And then in the final instance, level of world leadership, the main characteristic that we're asking leaders to embrace is an approach of sharing. If you think about it, we have rich nations in the world and we have poor nations in the world. Now, let's for a moment take something like corruption out of it, and let's take common crimes, white-collar crimes, let's take it out of the equation. You'll find that the contribution to the wealthy countries are the ones that have resources. They've just been blessed with resources. Oil, gold, mineral, whatever. It happened to be in this country. And then the immediate thinking of that, when I find these rich resources or these resources, is to commercialize it. So I take it and I sell it to the rest of the world so that I can build a wealthy nation. And the minute you do that, you have a persistence of this inequality. So as opposed to having a commercial model of ownership, we're asking leaders to consider a model of sharing. So it's a very long answer to your question, Carmen, but that really if leaders need to understand why we need to think differently, it spans over self, team, organization, society, and world. It's not just you need to think differently because you've got to be flexible and get your business back up and running. No, that's simple and short-sighted. We have this chance to reset how we create the next world. And that's what we ask people, what we're asking people to think differently about.
Thank you. And so that talks to your framework, your connected leadership framework. And what the thread that brings all of that together is this need to be connected and to move away from being disconnected. So thank you for explaining that to us, and it's such an expanded view that we're not isolated, that we do need to think in connected terms and think beyond just ourselves, but on a world level as leaders. Can you give me, pick any of those, one or two of those aspects, and share with me how you help leaders practically think differently? For instance, let's pick self. How can they practically start thinking differently about self?
Well, we have a number of tools. Okay, it's always a good idea to have some sort of a starting point, and to have that starting point not being me telling you where you are, or what I think, because that's just opinion and it's just based on perception. So we have a number of tools that we use, which gives a very objective view of an individual. So on self. For instance, we have a tool that's known as the 5-lens Enneagram tool. So this is it's an assessment that's based on your behavioral styles as a leader. What type of leader are you? Are you more of a driver, more visionary, more an insights type person, or keen on delivery and implementation? Kind of give you, I wouldn't say categorizing you, but giving you a fair sense of what is the strongest style, or my style of preference that I have. So we use tools like that in the 5-lens. Then we'll also test your level of maturity, emotional intelligence, your ability to impact on others, your own self-resilience. Something that's very interesting, for instance, is your decision-making energy centers. So when we take decisions in life, we use either our head or our heart or our gut, a combination of all three. But most of us have a very strong preference. So I'm more of a gut person. Someone else might be more of a intellectual person, and let's say my wife maybe is more of an emotional person. So we use and for you to understand that. So how we get so a starting point to get people to think differently is, first and foremost, to do a kind of assessment that gives them a mirror image of themselves, and then they know what there is to work with. And then what we typically do is, within a team or within an organization, we can take that tool, for instance, we can expand it into the let's say the team culture. And it's quite interesting because very quickly you can kind of see why the team operates the way in which they do, based on the leadership style of the leader, of this individual. And then making the point that, look, if you want to have the team operating differently, you are the one that's got to change. You have to drive that change. I often go back to just a quick story. I remember back in 2008-9, I traveled just like way too much. I actually burned out at the end of 2010, really physically. And one year I was sitting at an airport. I was counting how many flights I've done. In that year alone, I've done 49 flights. That's a flight every week. Nobody can live like that. So, but in that time, I remember I used to come home. I used to bring a gift to my wife and to my daughter, a toy, and then something for my son always. And it's the way in which I kind of, I made it bearable for that time. And the one evening, and we were sitting around the table, and one of my trips was cancelled. And I said to the family, it's fantastic. I'm not going away, so I'm here for the weekend. So I've decided that we should go away for the weekend and spend some family time. And immediately I could see my wife being very happy about this. Finally, it's not just her with the kids alone. What a drag, and it can be a nightmare. And my daughter very excited. I think my daughter at that stage was about 5. 4 or 5, and you're running into a room, getting her dolls and stuff that she wants to take away for the weekend. And I distinctly remember my son sitting on the other side of the table, and he looked at me and he said, I kind of went and said, hey, Josh, so, what do you think? And he said to me, he said, well, can I think about it? And I was very surprised. I mean, I teach my kids to, they speak up, think for themselves, but if it kind of comes at you unexpected, you're still surprised. You go, what? Think about it. So I said, what do you want to think about? He said, no, well, he wants to know whether he can bring a friend. And I said to him, look, it's it's difficult because it's a family event. So, but if you have to bring a friend, I said, what's his name? And then I could just see him getting a little bit upset, disappointed. He said to me, it's not a he, it's a she. So I realized, this boy has moved on. He's got a girlfriend. And in that moment, I distinctly realized that, there's another lion in the den, somebody else that's got hair under their arms. It's not just me anymore. And there was a number of ways in which I could play the situation. I could be authoritarian, which a lot of leaders a lot of times are, and say, well, I'm sorry to hear about that, but I'm home for this weekend. We haven't been out as a family for how long? So I'm sorry, buddy, as long as you're under my roof, weekend family it will be. You can play that card if you want to, and we all know how that ends. And it's exactly the same in the workplace. You can tell your team members, fall in line or else. And yeah, you'll get them to fall in line because they need their jobs and the paychecks. But, do you really get a team that perform? Are you in that moment? Are you developing someone, or are you just reminding them who's the boss? Or I could, take another approach. I could say to maybe my wife, I said, look, maybe you can talk to him, tonight, after I've gone to bed, just talk some sense into the boy's head. Or I could simply just compromise and say to him, okay, cool, bring your girlfriend with, and then 3 months from now, let me and you go for a little fishing trip, because I think it's time for us to have that man-to-man chat. There's a number of ways in which I could play it. But the learning is, the significant point is, and coming back to your question, how do you get people to realize that they have to change? The significant thing there was, if you have the higher ground, if you have the position of wisdom, if you have the position of authority, leaders a lot of time make the mistake. They think it's something that they need to enforce. It's not. What should happen is, in your wisdom, you should realize that I could not expect my boy to change. He's too young. He's in love. This is only going to end in a fight. He doesn't have the wisdom or the ability. I had to have the largeness of heart to realize that I need to change. I'm the one that's got to make the change. I need to change my ways. If I want a different result, change has to come from me. And a lot of times leaders don't necessarily see that. They think that, they come up with a plan and it's the team that needs to change. The team's not going to change if you don't change, Carl. It's as simple as that.
Yes.
So those are some of the things that we do. Yeah, just to answer your question. And that's also why it's important to start with self.
Absolutely. It all starts at the top. When we do turnarounds and transformations, we get exactly that. Come and fix the team. And it's a little bit a sobering thought when we say, no, we have to start with you and your executive.
With you. Yeah.
And that's like, whoa, and that's not why I brought you in here.
Yeah.
So your whole framework and the whole principle around connectedness stemmed from an experience you had in North Sudan. So
yeah,
inspiration for everything you do today came out quite out of a cathartic moment for you. Do you want to share a little bit of that story, which really shaped so much of who you are?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'm always, very honored and happy in a way when people do ask me the story, because it's, there's so much learning in it, for us. I'm going to start at the horrible beginning by saying that, I haven't always felt this way about, people and business and the world. as what I do today. I used to be what I would call quite situationally arrogant before Sudan. And it basically it coincided with a lot of things. You know, by the time that I went to Sudan, I was going to take a position, a two-year contract as a CEO to set up a startup there, which had joint shareholders in Khartoum, the capital of Sudan, and then also in South Africa. And I think we had one South American involved as well. So this was quite a big contract for me. It was the first time. I was almost on the peak of my own career. I would always work for myself as an entrepreneur, and this is the kind of work I did. I would take contracts where other people would take positions, and by the time I went to Sudan, it was hugely successful. I mean, everything I did was just off the scale, man. I mean, I didn't advertise one. I didn't spend 1 cent on advertising. I never had to. It was just word of mouth from the one contract to the other, and I also started teaching in that time. So business schools would ask me to come and do sessions where I bring some practice into the room, and I just happened to be good at it. I loved it. They loved me. And, you know, so the next thing I was also teaching, starting my PhD, finished my MBA. Man, just the one success after the other. And I think what happened in Northern Sudan, I failed dismally, and I'll tell you how I failed. But I think what happened by the time that I got there, I forgot a very fundamental thing, and that is that in terms of success or failure sometimes, you have three contributors. You have yourself, you have your organization, or let's say your support team, and you have the external environment. You need a bit of luck out there, man. You know, if the economy is always against you, or there's a pandemic, or political legislation just shuts you down, I mean, you know, what are you going to do? You need a little bit of luck out there. Sometimes the environment just needs to be right, a good fit. And then you need a hell of a supportive team. You know, the reason why people sometimes stand out in a crowd is because they're sitting on somebody else's shoulders. You got to have a team to carry you. It's not a solo flight. And then there's you. And I think what happened to me when I got to Sudan is, I forgot these other two components. I forgot the supporting team and the rest of the world. And I started to think that, you know, I am so good because of me, and the success we have in the company is because of me. And that's what we call situational arrogance. And you either fall flat on your face, or somebody punches you in it. But you need someone to jerk you to get out of that, because it becomes a blind spot. And what was significant about Sudan is, in the Western world, my levels of arrogance were seen as confidence and professionalism and expertise. So you can kind of get away with it. So situational arrogance is an arrogance that you are not aware of. You think that this is how it should be. So it's not that you purposefully try to be arrogant or talk down to people. You become that, but you don't see it. Because wherever you go, your success is being celebrated. So why change the recipe? And in Sudan, the company was just going south. I mean, we couldn't get it off the ground. We didn't have returns. We had falling participant numbers. We also did leadership development there. It was a nightmare. And then I fell ill, and I had to go to a local doctor, a GP. I was about 6 months into the contract, if I remember correctly. And I hated everything about the place. The people, you know, I blamed it on them. I said, well, we're not successful because English is not their first language. It's a different culture. And this was my first introduction into the Arab world. I knew nothing about the Arab world before the time, despite having traveled all over the world. You know, it's the climate, it's the government, it's a military, you know, kind of they call it a democracy, but it was sort of a one state, one party state, you know, very much enforced through military rule. So everything was wrong about the place, and I blamed that for our failure. And I remember I was sitting in a waiting room, and while I was sitting waiting for the doctor, there was this Sudani that entered with his boy, and he started talking to me. Because they're very friendly people. He started to tell me stuff about Sudan. And I remember you know what? I tolerated these discussions, but I was not in the mood, because I knew I was about to get fired. I was really sick. I was in a foreign place with a foreign language, with a foreign country. A culture. I just wanted to get out, go back and put this chapter behind me. Because Steyn Heckroodt doesn't fail. You know, Steyn doesn't get fired I mean, I fire people. People don't fire me. Yeah, I said, I was just not ready for this. And then he told me something that changed my life. He told me that in certain parts in northeastern Sudan, there are trees that grow up to 1,000 years old. And the significance of this age is at this age, the top part of the tree breaks off the bottom part. But it's not, it doesn't split open. It's as if the bottom part stays intact. And it's literally almost as if the wind is blowing a cap from your hat. The top part just breaks off. But the tree is hollow. And at that stage, the circumference of the tree is about that of 10 grown men holding hands, outstretched hands. That's the circumference of the tree. And it's about 8 foot high. So in the rainy season, it catches water. And I remember I was still sitting there listening and going, yeah, it's very interesting. Okay, can we get on with it? And then he said to me that sometimes they find the skeletons of Westerners like you. Now, he referred to me as a Westerner probably because of the color of my skin. He didn't know that I'm actually from the continent, which is fine. He said to me, sometimes they find the skeletons of Westerners like you that got lost in the desert. They find these skeletons against the tree trunk. But when they look closely at the spore in the sand, they can see how this person has been moving around the tree, trying to stay in the shade, not knowing that there's water on the inside.
Wow.
And that's when I realized I'm the problem. I'm really the skeleton against the tree. I'm in a foreign country. I have the situational arrogance that I think I should come and teach them something and tell them how things are done. I never bothered to connect. I never bothered to ask. I never really listened. I was kind of just taking my winning recipe from other parts in the world and was just coming to blueprint, bang, slapped us into Sudan. And you know what? If it's not working, it's your problem, not mine. And I literally just changed my approach. I went to the board. We had our meeting about 2 or 3 days later. They did want to fire me. I begged them to keep me, like literally begged. Because I told them I found the reason. I know why we are failing. We're failing because of me. And it's a kind of a funny thing to ask the board where you say, look, we're failing because of me, but I please want you to keep me. I didn't think they would, but it was one guy in specific, he took pity on me and he was willing to give me another chance and he convinced the others. You always just need one person to believe in you, carry you through a time like that. And they extended the contract. And all I did, Carmen, is I just changed. I went from what I call a teacher to a learner. I went back into the classroom and I started asking people about them, their religion, their history, their background. I got invited into their house. I saw hospitality like I've never seen before. I got invited into their house. It's the first time. It was an Eid of some sort in December. Sitting on the ground, there was about 8 guys around this massive silver tray of goat that we eating off the ground and sitting on the ground. And I had to learn to eat with my hands. Being South African, I can do a barbecue with my hands, but not the rice and everything else mixed in between and the gravy. And, it was something to get used to. In the beginning, I was like, I didn't really like it, but I just started to embrace the culture. I started to learn from the culture. And I saw something very interesting, which also changed my life. And it's got a lot to do with this notion of developing people and sharing and caring. On the opposite side of this table, with this silver platter, there were 2 guys that were having a fight, an argument. And of course, I couldn't understand because it's Arabic. And they also, when Arab people get upset, they really talk with their face and their body. They're very descriptive. You look at them and you can go, whoa, this guy must really be upset. They raise their voices. And I thought, something's terribly wrong here. Maybe I'm not welcome in the house. Immediately I thought it's me. And it ended up that they were arguing, they were fighting over which part of the goat is the best part to give to me. And, coming from a family of 5 kids, I'm not used to that. In our family, you fight to get the best piece for yourself. As a matter of fact, while father is saying grace and everybody's eyes are shut, you'll steal it across the table if it comes to that. So I fell in love with the Arab world, with their culture, their belief system, their leadership approach, the values. It's just, I learned so much from them. And that was the change. I mean, to give you an idea, the company lasted another 2 years. They then wanted to extend my contract with another 2 years. We turned the whole thing around. And all I did was to connect with people. All I did was to self-reflect and realize how situationally arrogant I have become. All I did was starting to focus on building up people, developing people, as opposed to teaching a curriculum, and looking for the best mark or the highest grade. So, and that, when I moved here 10 years later, I never thought, or 6 years later, I never thought that, we'll end up writing a framework about it. Here in Dubai, I met with Dr. Wada, who's the chairperson of our organization. He's a poet in the Arabic community, also an author of multiple books, and has a fairly senior job here at one of the oil companies. And he helped me. I said to him, look, it's very difficult for me when I teach, and I teach locals, I feel there's a disconnect. It's like I'm coming in with a Western thought paradigm, and I'm teaching this to them, and they get it on a knowledge level, but not really on a level of understanding. It's as if they can't apply it because it's not homegrown, So I need someone to help me to cross this divide. Otherwise, I always leave the classroom feeling the lesson's not done. And he helped me over a space of 2 years. He sat with me every Sunday, first Sunday of the month, and we had coffee and shisha here. I think South Africans call it a hubbly bubbly. We had that here at a local coffee spot for a month, for 18 months. This guy just helped me, and the end result was this framework, which we then only took and decided, let's start a little business, and that's how the whole platform for connected leadership came about. Oh. The nice thing, just one last thing on this, the nice thing about it is I never knew this about Dr. Wada. I met him by chance. The same person that showed mercy for me back in Sudan happened to also be a good friend of Dr. Wada. It's amazing how small the world is. He now operates out of Oman, which is the neighboring state to the UAE. And I phoned up Dr. Wada about 3 days later after we had coffee together. It was a group of us. It was about 5 of us around the table, and started to journey this leadership development with him. So I never bothered to Google this guy. I never really knew who he was. And only after we did the thing, we said, well, maybe we should put a business together. I went to the trouble of now having to draw up a profile for Wada. And it's not Wada, it's Dr. Wada. It's got a double major, double MBA, undergrad in the UK in engineering, sit on how many international committees for sustainability, green sustainability, author of multiple books. I mean, the guy is off the scale. He's got a, the stuff that I have to put behind his name on his business card is as long as my arm. And the wonderful thing about it is he never told me this. That's the thing what I so enjoy, about this part of the world is, people they don't flaunt that greatness. They have a kind of a humility, amongst them that just make them, these great people. If you bother to get to sort of, have an open mindset and to learn from them. So that's again, long answer, Carmen, but that's the story.
Fantastic story. So much meaning, so much depth, and incredible discoveries and learnings from that, which has led to this incredible framework, which you're now sharing with the world. And your framework and your tenet of connectedness resonates directly with the mission of this show, which is to bring humanity back to business. And I want to just, so you had this experience before this failure where you were, like you put, there was situational arrogance and there was a lot of success. Mm. You have this experience and you move more into this confidence and humility and strength to be vulnerable, which is a completely different space to operate in. Give us an idea of, in that new space and really being connected, really bringing your humanity into what you do and teaching others and bringing those human principles. How much of your life and business and career changed, maybe in surprising ways than if you compared to what you thought was success? What was the surprising changes?
The short answer is everything changed. Because I've always been a very competitive person. And that's maybe why I started the show as well today, where I have, a bit of a hang up with competitiveness. Look, there's nothing wrong in competition, of course. The world will not move forward and develop if we do not compete. It depends on what you use it for, though. So if you use competition to drive performance, I think it can have a very negative impact, especially on young children. And that then eventually spills over into your later life. But a lot of things changed because I moved from a competitive model to one of not having to be the best in the room anymore, not having to compete, and rather learning from others as opposed to me doing all the teaching. So you do apply that. You end up applying that with your friends as well. Just becoming a better listener. Because I used to not be. I used to be the kind of guy that, even on a social occasion, if we hang out, let's say we're doing a barbecue Saturday night, my mates will arrive and they'll all ask me how I am. And I'll spend about 15 minutes telling them how I am. But I never really bother to ask them how they are. It's kind of, very one-sided, almost, a little bit of a self-centered approach or person. But the thing is, again, to come back to the situational arrogance, the reason why it didn't bother me is I got a lot of energy, and people like my energy and my ideas and forward thinking. So when I talk, they go like, "Wow, that's cool, man. It's really interesting." And then I'll call one of the other people over, "Come listen to what Steyn's saying." So without me even asking for it, next thing I've got 6 people. I'm telling them how it's going. So yeah, I never ended up asking them how it's going with them. So that changed significantly afterwards. And in my relationship with my wife as well, I think it's still a lot of work there because I'm very, I had to work a lot on my empathy. Empathy is not one of my strongest leadership skills. I got sympathy, so I can feel for and I can help students and participants and companies and really have a lot of sympathy for companies that's struggling right now. But empathy is a kind of a different characteristics where you really immerse yourself into other people's challenges, and it's not one of my key strengths. So I think still a lot of work needed there, but I calmed down a bit. I wasn't so explosive anymore, or aggressively passionate. I kind of slowed down and took more interest in the other parties. So family, social. The surprise, to answer your question, is I have never achieved the height of success as what I have achieved in Dubai. It's one of the most amazing things. I always wanted to do work for Harvard, as an example. And I always believed that to work for Harvard one day, I've got to be the best, first in class. Best slides, best material, best preparation, best facilitation. We drive. And after what happened in Sudan, I kind of let it go. I in a sense kind of make peace with myself. I was okay with it. It was always going to be a disappointment. And then at one stage, I remember I said to myself, well, it was kind of a little bit of an arrogant big dream, Steyn. Like, really, going to work for Harvard? Come on, man. And then it came to me. About 3 or 4 years ago, here in Dubai, I was approached by them. And the interesting thing is, to become a Harvard Business School moderator, it's not something that you can apply for. They don't advertise this. Somebody has to nominate you. And I did a program at Emirates MBD, which is a local bank. And the head of the LD, Learning and Development Department, he's a local Emirati. Without me knowing it, after I've done this program with him, he went to Harvard and he nominated me because he knew one of the Harvard guys. So they approached me. I did the interview, and then I started to do work for them. And it's off the scale to work for these guys. I mean, there's a lot of things you can say about Harvard, and sometimes even there's a little bit of arrogance. I don't know, but damn, they're good, man. I mean, everything it's a well-oiled machine. I mean, the wheels are all turning. The support you get, the tech, the material, the developing teams. It's just unbelievable to work for an organization that's operationally so smooth, so efficient, so slick. And that was something I kind of gave up on. And to be honest with you, I remember one evening we were sitting. They were having a kind of an induction dinner with 3 new moderators. And it was myself, there was a lady from India that also resides in Dubai, and then there was a gentleman that came through the military background in the States. And the whole evening we were, we had to tell a story. We had the big cheese here from Harvard. He came down to meet us and have a little bit of social, but just kind of getting to know what he's dealing with. And I remember when the gentleman from the States, when he had a chance to talk, I recognized a little bit of myself in him, the old Steyn. And it was quite interesting for me to watch him and observe. And I left it there. And about 3 months later, I'm doing a program again, and I bump into the same guy again from Harvard. And I said, listen, how's it going? And I haven't seen this other guy. I can't remember his name, and it would be wrong to mention it. But let's say his name was Jack. And I said to him, I've been wondering, I haven't seen Jack at all. Is he very busy? You guys using him? And he said to me, no, we let him go. And I said, what do you mean you let him go? The guy had such a good track record. He said, no, I came down for dinner with a reason. I wanted to meet the people. I was not interested in what you were doing. So that what I did not know is that evening was actually the final interview. I thought it was just come and meet the new recruitees, And then I realized that it made sense what he said. He said they had to let him go because he was the old Steyn. Yeah, I realized that if I was still that guy, I never would have gotten this opportunity, no matter how good I was and believed that I was. That was probably the biggest off the scale surprise success. Just never saw that one coming. And yeah, so very, very grateful for that. My career here, at the university, ending up as president of the local university in the US, big thing. And again, it's not, my wife always accuses me of this. She says to me, oh, you're a real career junkie. And you know what? I'm not. I always tell her I'm not. I just happen to love what I do. If people come here, they say to me, oh, you're such a good leader. I don't try to be a good leader. I just try to develop people. That's all. That's all I focus on. And that's where this individual greatness story comes from. Because I didn't know that I had it. I ended up being blind for it. And the day that I discovered it, I became humble. I became vulnerable. I became okay with myself. I started to connect. I was more interested in other people than myself. That day, my entire world changed. That was the greatness. I never realized that I could be so impactful on people's lives.
Fantastic.
So, that's what I try to do. Just try to develop people. So, yeah.
What you've described is almost contrary to everything that we're taught. And if we look at the fabric of society and everything that gets us into the messy situations and the highest challenges that we experience, we tend to try and solve that with potentially too much arrogance, with disconnected way, not a lot of humility, too much blame, etc. So you're explaining something completely different. And again, coming back to that, this real humanity approach, and yet look at the fulfillment, the success levels, the sustainability of what you're doing. Thank you for showing us a disruptive new way of being, which actually is just being true to us. So it's not even really a departure of what we are as human beings. It's who we are as human beings and tapping back into that greatness. Thank you. That was really beautiful, the way you've showed that and depicted it through your stories. What would you say, Steyn, given how you've explained earlier, the myriad challenges we're going through now, what would you say for leaders really feeling it, really immersed in this, the challenge, the convergence of challenges they're experiencing on so many levels? What would you say is the single most important thing they could focus on to start to move through the challenges they're experiencing?
I would say probably diversity of people. And the reason why I say that is when you deal with complexity, I've long since learned, and I've experienced it, that at times of complexity is better served through diversity than what it's served through expertise. If you talk decision, because look, what's the challenge of leaders? The biggest challenge that leaders have is that they still have to take decisions on a daily basis. They can't let this just hang and wait for things to normalize again, and then it's going to be business as usual. No, they have to still, that pressure, that stress of having to take a decision amidst so much unpredictability is very, very difficult. When we deal with levels of decision making, there's basically four domains that we refer to. The one is simple, and I've briefly referred to that. Things are simple, it's predictable. It's where you categorize and you segment. PESTEL, SWOT, 4 to 5 forces, things are fairly straightforward. The other one is chaotic, where, by means of a metaphor to explain that again, let's say the fire alarm goes off. Things are chaotic. You're not going to think or probe. You're just simply going to act straight away. You're going to kind of make sense of it afterwards. The third one is complicated. So complicated, typically we use expertise. So something is very, very complicated at your workplace, your place of work. You either yourself have the expertise to figure it out, or if you don't, you get an expert in. But you have a strong sense of something being complicated. I always say to people, it's like, I'm no technician or motor vehicle mechanic. So when I drive home, if there's something wrong, I can hear it in the engine. So I do have that sense. But I do realize that I got to take it to the expert at the workshop to fix. I can't pop the hood and try to fix it. So that's the level of expertise. And a lot of organizations are fairly okay to deal with things are in the complicated domain. The one that we're struggling with is complex, because complex doesn't stand still. It keeps on moving all the time. It's like if I had to ask you to go and uproot your garden tonight, and once you've done it, tomorrow morning plant it back again. As well as I do, you'll probably lose all of it. Why? Because the biological system keeps on moving, and that's complex systems. Now, the challenge we have as individuals is a lot of leaders are finding themselves right now in a domain of disorder. It's what Snowden wrote an article about it a number of years ago. He's I don't think he's a professor at Harvard, but it was published in HBR. So this category of disorder is when we don't know where we're finding ourselves at the moment. Is it simple? Is it chaotic? Is it complex? Is it complicated? And when we don't know, we fall back to our default that we're most comfortable with. Now, here's the danger. If you are, let's say you work in a very bureaucratic organization, typically your environment's very simple. So when things do get complex, you would want to solve this complexity by being simple about it. You can't. You can clearly hear the mismatch there. Equally, if you're somebody that's, let's say you're an expert consultant, you are used to dealing with a complicated domain. So when things are complex, you again, if you're not sure, you will try and fix complex with complicated, which means, you analyze, you sense, and, you act. So each one of these domains have got a specific decision-making model. And the idea is to get it right. And when it comes to complexity, the model of probing, experimenting a little bit is best served through diversity, not through expertise. So the first step that I would recommend here for business leaders is to, if you, for instance, have 7 people reporting into you, which is a standard structure in an organization. So I'm CEO, I've got a director of marketing, of IT, finance, operations, production, about 7 people. Flatten that first layer of reportees, flatten it out to 20 people if you have to. Get more people that report back into you and that you communicate to and ask a guidance from and ideas from. So expand your scope of diversity, because the chances, just statistically, if you look at probability, the chances of someone having the right answer amongst 20 is bigger than someone having the right answer amongst 7. So that, and also, the other reason why we recommend embracing diversity at this stage is, if you think about it, diversity is actually the only internal competitive edge that an organization has. All the other resources an organization has are generic. So you have finance, people, infrastructure, information, very generic. Diversity sits within people, and it's how you harness that to get the organization almost to a level of, let's say, cultural competence. But you mine this richness of diverse opinions. That'll get you ahead. That'll get you through this. Because the other thing that you, of course, do when you embrace diversity is, let's say you expand this first layer of 20 people that's now going to report into you. If you run an organization of 4,000 people, you can't talk to anyone. So what you do need to do, coupled to this diversity, is you have to. You have no choice. You have to empower people. You've got to learn to trust people on different levels to take decisions without running everything by you or without running everything by line. We don't have the time. You have to empower. So and that empowerment again is possible if you're comfortable with diverse people coming from different countries and different cultures. I mean, a lot of times here in Dubai, we have 218 different cultures working and living here. But sometimes there's a little bit of discrimination, So somebody would ask you, okay, so your boss, where's he from? And then you'll say, no, he's from India. And then they go, okay, from India. So, what does that mean? Okay, from India. It means that you have a preconceived idea of that country and its people. Or they'll all say, no, he's from Syria. From Syria. Okay, now that makes sense. What makes sense, dude? So the idea is, when we talk diversity, is to break those barriers of discrimination and really engage with people as an individual and find out what the Indian, the Pakistani, the Syrian, the Bangladeshi has to say about COVID, and empower them to make decisions and not say, no, those kind of people, the people from the Philippines, I don't know, I don't think we can, empower them to make decisions. I mean, you're not going to move forward. And a lot of these things are very, very difficult for leaders because they're not used to it. Especially in a country like Dubai, where you have, a lot of expats that basically falls up the top layers of the white collar jobs, and a lot of Southeast Asians that's doing the work, which means they don't take the decisions. The decisions are taken on the top tiers. Now we have no choice. We have to empower. We have to trust across nations, across nationalities, and across different cultures. You have to empower. So, wrong answer again, Carmen, but diversity. Engaging with diversity for me would be the first step.
Excellent. Thank you. And I know many people are going to be knocking on your door to help them figure that the complex out by not making it simple and diversifying. Thank you for that. A final question for you, Steyn. If you could speak with all 7 billion people on the planet, what message would you love to share with them?
A lot of what I believe in today in terms of building up people, doesn't come from me as the author or the creator of that idea. It comes from a gentleman called Clay Christensen, and he was a Harvard business professor. He passed away almost a year ago now. And in Harvard Business School, there's almost two pathways or two thought paradigms of strategy. The one deals more with strategy in the simple domain. So Michael Porter is very well known internationally, Porter's 5 Forces, coming up with frameworks and models. I think he's somewhere in his mid-70s by now, but really an esteemed, internationally respected individual. The other school or approach to strategy deals more with disruption, uncertainty, complexity, looking at business model flexibility as opposed to strategy as the competitive building block of an organization. And Clay Christensen led that approach. So obviously you can guess, which one of the two I favored. I followed Clay. I read all his things. He was just a wonderful man. And one of the lessons he did when he came to the end of their specific academic year was he took the business principles out there in the world that they teach MBAs to apply, and he asked students to apply it to their life. And he asked them 3 questions. What can you do to ensure happiness in your career? What can you do to ensure that happiness in your family or immediate family? And what are you going to do to stay out of prison? Now, the last question is a bit of a, people frowned when he asked that question. But interestingly enough, the Enron scandal, as an example, that was committed by a company leader that's ex-Harvard. So it's not that people go to Harvard Business School and they never tempted, to be a little bit more greedy and bend the rules, and in that scenario, in that case, they ended up in prison. But anyway, that's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the middle one. How can you make sure that you find ultimate happiness in your place of work? And he tells this story of the woman that comes to work every morning, and she's dressed up, beautifully dressed, made up, hair's done. She looks like, fresh flower, man, just ready for the day, full of energy. And then he notices as she leaves at the end of the day how ragged she looks and worn down and tired. And he realizes that something happened between 8 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock in the afternoon, which is probably a boss, a manager, a leader of some sort that wears her down. And he then asked the critical question. He said, but why would you do that? You would only do that if you don't realize that leadership and management is one of the most honorable, noble things to do in life. If you don't realize that, that's when you break people down. That's when you wear people down. And they come to work in the morning, they're so excited, and they dressed up, and they go home. What are you sending home? I always ask myself that, what am I sending home at the end of the day? Do I send faculty home that gets home and they're excited to be home and they're bubbly and they got a lot of stuff to tell and share? Or do I send faculty home that just moans and bitches about the boss when they get back home at the end of the day and pour a whiskey and just want to get over this day, and maybe even in the process pick a fight with their wife or their kids? You as a manager and a leader, this is what I want to tell the 7 billion people, not just as a manager and a leader, but you as a human being. You are confronted with that choice every single day. Whenever you deal with someone else, whether you were involved in a fender bender, whether you had bad service at a restaurant, whether they messed up your booking at a hotel, whether your secretary just didn't make the appointment right or finish the report in time, every single day there's opportunities where you have a choice, whether you want to break somebody down or whether you want to build them up. And that's all I want to, I don't want to tell 7 billion people something. I want to leave them with a question. And that is, what are you going to do? What are you going to do when you are in this situation? Are you going to break down or are you going to build up? And let me be the first to say to you, I'm no angel. I get it wrong many a times. But you have to be honest when you get it wrong to yourself as well. Don't try to be angelic and try to be perfect. You're going to make a hash of it. All you need to do is to focus on building up people. And sometimes I have done it. I did it just the other day. I was rude to someone that filled my car with gas at a fueling station. I drove back there 7 days later. The guy didn't even recognize me anymore. I mean, he probably sees 100, 200, 300 people a day. I just went to apologize because I was an idiot and I was wrong. So it's not about getting it right. It's about thinking. Am I developing or am I breaking down? And when you have broken down, go and fix it. None of us like to be broken down by anybody else, especially at work when you're in a power play scenario. Or your boss shouts and screams at you, wears you down, plays the man, not the ball. It's just horrible. Clay Christensen, and this goes to his memory, may he rest in peace, said, management and leadership is the most noble, honorable thing that you can do in the world. So do it. That's it, Carmen.
Thank you so much, Steyn, and thank you for it's been such a privilege to speak with you because you're a professor, yet you didn't give us a textbook approach. You give us real, raw insights born out of being in the trenches and seen a different way to do things to build people up. Thank you for that inspiration. Thank you for sharing your time with us. And thank you for what you're doing in the world and helping us bring our deeply human sides back. Thank you so much.
An absolute pleasure, Carmen. Thank you to you and the team. Good luck with the good work you're doing as well. Thank you very much.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Steyn.